Morning, fish keepers. Cam here from the fishroom.co.nz. We've done it. We've made it to Friday or maybe Thursday, depending on where in the world you are. Probably Thursday because we're just ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
You well, John? Or should I say Dave? Damn it, I missed my opportunity.
I'm good, mate.
Cool. All right.
The weekend as usual.
Yep. All right. We won't muck around too long. We have ourselves a guest waiting in the wings. Let's bring up our guest. Good afternoon, Ryan.
Yeah, good afternoon and good morning to you.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Thank you for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Can you just tell everybody who is watching a little bit about you, who you are, and how you got into keeping fish, please?
Well, I actually am pretty new to the hobby still. I'm kind of a COVID fish keeper. I had one fish tank with my daughter when she was a toddler. So 2001, I think I was looking up just for the podcast. But yeah, 2001, we did a 20-gallon, and it was kind of my toddler dictated what was in it. So now that I know actually about fish, it's a pretty hilarious list of fish that we had in there.
Yeah. So what did you have in there at that time?
Oh, a little bit of everything. It was a community tank. It was all based on this little tiny, like orange rimmed book, about a half-inch thick. And yeah, so it was all community friendly species. But yeah, no, we had kissing gourami because he's cute and nobody knew it got to the size of a dinner plate.
Yep.
One of each kind of gourami because they have the little touchy feelers. So my daughter really liked giving them 5 on the side of the tank. We had a red-tailed shark named Scrappy because that was part of the description, that he's a little scrappy. Zebra Danios. I posted a picture on my Instagram today with a picture. I didn't even remember that we had platies, but some orange platies with black tails and many other things, just kind of all together in a nice community tank. Proper.
Cool. Sounds like a very community tank.
Yeah, and I think later on we did the old iridescent shark game as well. So a little bit of all the ones that should not be in aquarium stores at all.
Yeah. So iridescent sharks, they're the ones that get like 5 million meters long, yeah?
Yeah, I think 4 to 5 feet. And
yeah, we don't have them over here, and I'm happy about that.
I don't even know what their Latin name would be.
So what then got you from the community side into the botanical blackwater style aquarium?
Well, yeah, after that, then when I got my COVID Christmas present from my wife, I got a little fluval speck and filled it with some nice natural colored gravel and some plastic plants and a fake plastic rock type decor piece, because I didn't want to do real plants because they're too much work. So yeah, no, so it was super aesthetic. I also posted that on my Instagram today as well. But yeah, that's where I started in 2000. Then I did some more research and kind of stumbled upon George Farmer and the Amano sort of stuff. So kind of started going full tilt into the planted aquarium direction, mostly Uegumi inspired, just because I like the building of the rocks and escaping with the rocks and stuff like that. But then I just grew tired of the scapes being so stagnant, and like once you get them to where you want them, they're kind of dull and boring. And then kind of went down the next direction of looking for where the fish actually live that I'm keeping, and that's kind of what drew me into like, oh, they don't live in habitats like this at all. They live in flooded forests and palm swamps and all that sort of stuff. So once I started actually doing the research and seeing where fish actually lived, it made big changes to how I was keeping my fish, because then I started to try and keep my fish in a habitat as close as I could replicate to where they would actually live.
Very good. Cool. Oh, what's happened? My page has changed. Spaghetti-o. Hold the line caller. I clicked the wrong button. And we're back. Cool. Can you give us an overview of what a botanical aquarium is?
Well, for me, lately it's been starting with the substrate and kind of looking at what you're starting with in nature. So a lot of mine start very similar, but I usually try and mix more than just throwing the pet store variety sand. It's usually layers of things. So my default would just be using like a cocoa core. Some people would use peat moss mixed in with the gravels and sand. So yeah, I still use a pet store variety sand because carrot seed kind of gets me the colors I've been after, but then I'll mix in little grits and gravels and stuff like that to just add more normalness to it, and then broken up leaves and twigs and everything kind of all muddled together and then layer up from there.
I find substrate really interesting. Like straight out the bag, there's so many that just look average in the bag. Put them into the water, they look pretty good. But then when you kind of mix a little bit of this and a little bit of this and throw in a sprinkle of this, and all of a sudden you've got this totally different substrate that actually looks very similar to what it is that you were originally trying to get, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then when you've got your own sort of secret recipe type of thing, you go, I'm going to continue to work with that, and that'll be what I use, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The first time I put leaves and bits of branches and things through my substrate, I noticed a massive difference. The substrate just became this healthy piece of the aquarium that everything just thrived from, whereas it was just sterile, sand or quartz sand or whatever. It didn't do anything. It was inert. But the minute you start putting debris and everything through it, things start living in it, and it transforms it, and it looks so much better.
Yeah, I know. I was still in my infancy at that game. Like, there's so many other people that are way more advanced at the building of the proper substrate that I'm always kind of jealous of. Just how long they'll evolve their substrate before they even add stuff on top of it or fish to the tank. So CD-scapes is one that does a really great job, and he's got all sorts of life and critters in his tank. So.
Who was that, sorry?
CD-scapes.
CD-scapes.
CD, like compact disc,
yes.
kind of.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
I thought you said D for
I
it.
think there was an underscore in his Instagram handle.
Yeah.
But he would be a good example of one that I feel like is a lot more hardcore than me. But yeah, that's something I'm always looking to evolve and find the right pieces to add to the recipe. And Scott at Tannin Aquatics has been doing a really good job with all his mixed substrates and stuff like that. So I think Tannin inspired a lot of the directions I've gone in this botanical method aquarium game.
Yeah, Scott really inspired me. The way that he just talks about everything, it makes it sound really magical and mythical, and it just opens up so much. Has his podcast popped back up again, or is it still dormant?
No, he's kind of been, but he has ebbs and flows. Like, he's kind of up and about and doing stuff, and then I think something else distracts him, and he goes and works on other projects many times through the times I've been following him anyway. So it's one of those downtimes at the moment. But yeah, like, his archive is so vast, and his blog, if you want visuals to go with the podcast, and then just basically search for anything you ever want to know about botanical method aquariums, and there should be a podcast addressing it. Like, it's more geared towards South America, so like, I find some of the Southeast Asian stuff isn't as in-depth as I want it to be, since I'm kind of more going down the Southeast Asian direction at the moment. But the layering and the techniques are universal. Like, if you look at a flooded forest even here, and then you look at pictures of a flooded forest anywhere, they all have a very similar vibe.
Yeah, we had him on
in the water.
18 months ago. Probably over that now, maybe 2 years ago. and talking to him blew me away and inspired me just as much as listening to his 5 to 8 minute podcast that he did. Like, just a phenomenal aquarist, and the way that he talks and thinks is just mind-blowing. If you haven't, sorry to derail the chat a little bit, but if you haven't checked out Scott's podcast, The Tint, it is well and truly worth it. I know it's definitely on Spotify. Yeah, get amongst it. Or if you haven't watched the live stream that we did with him, also check that out as well, because it's a good time.
Yeah.
Shameless wee plug there.
Yeah, no, like I highly recommend it. Like that's like I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing if I hadn't discovered the Tint podcast and his blog. Like both have been super integral into, and then him talking about look at nature. Like don't look at other people's tanks for inspiration. Look to where the fish actually live in the wild. Look at pictures, look at videos. And yeah, once I started doing that, and like Southeast Asia was really hard, but there's some really great guys doing some really great stuff out there now. Travonim, Travonim, has some really great videos of habitats in the wild.
Cool. So what is it about the botanical aquariums that captivates you the most?
Well, I'm a graphic designer by day, so I'm picky and I like setting things up and changing them. So like the aquascape kind of direction and the stagnantness of it, like it never changing. Whereas like listening to the Tint podcast, everything is always changing in the wild. Like a big gush of water could wash all those twigs and leaves away, and there's all the electonous input falling from the trees regularly. So you're always adding stuff, taking stuff away. If you want to do a little rescape, you can just say, like, that's what happens in the wild. Like, oh, now there's a new branch here. The other one is degraded and on the floor. And now we have this one building the structure and stuff like that. So really what appealed to me was the fact that I could change it. But the other thing that appealed to me is that I was replicating a habitat where they would naturally show their behaviors, breed without me doing anything and stuff like that. So like just trying to make a naturalistic environment for them, but also the fact that you're adding and taking away regularly, and there's constant change and constant biofilms growing, little critters popping up. It's just, I don't know, all of it. Like building the ecosystem is much more exciting to me than like trimming the trees or trimming the plants to look the same way they looked the last time I trimmed them, etc. Like I enjoy it and appreciate it, but I feel like this direction was what became more the right fit for me. And then just being inspired by the different areas in the world, and so many of them are very similar, but just different species.
I think what you sort of mentioned there, like floods come along, things get blown away, and it resets and it restarts, and it's all the same, but it's different. Also sort of plays into a little bit what Ethan was talking about a few weeks back about fish getting bored and can't remember the phrase that he used, stereotyping behavior, and like as an aquascaper, things like you said, you sort of trim the plants to the same point and they still look really good, but with botanicals you can drop a whole bunch more leaves and more botanical, more wood, whatever you want, and everything is just changed all over again, and there's more things for fish to play with and rummage with, and it changes just dramatically.
I think you know that what you're witnessing is what's going on at the bottom of a river. It just gives you a different experience altogether, because you're watching nature take part. Even though it's in your aquarium, it's still a natural process of decay. And being able to watch that in slow motion or in real time, and watching the snails take advantage of it, or the shrimps, or all the fish, the roaches and everything doing what they would do in the wild. You don't get that in an aquascape or any other kind of aquarium, which is what appeals to me.
I'm still waiting for the day when I can have a tank big enough that I can have Dichrosis, filamentaceous, swimming around, picking up leaves with little pike cichlids swimming behind them to catch the bigger things that the dichrosis aren't interested in. If you haven't checked out Project Piaba's videos on YouTube, they're super, super great. And that's one of my favorite things to try and spot happening in their videos, is finding the little dichrosis with their team of pikes that kind of follow behind to see what the dichrosis scare out from the leaves for the pikes to eat. So it would be such a great tank, but yeah, no, I know none of the tanks I keep would ever be big enough to have that pairing. But it's always been one in the wild that I've been a big fan of.
We don't have pike over here. I know they're fairly large. How large are they? Like, are they aquarium kept over where you are?
I think there's a mix of sizes. So, like, I think they've actually been broken into 2 categories now. So I think there's Pranacicola or something like that, which are the smaller ones. But even the smaller ones would be up 4 to 6 inch, I think. But yeah, like they're a very predatory fish, so I haven't even really investigated too much. It was just a partnership that I enjoyed. Like, they don't predate on the dichrosis in the wild because they're, they have a symbiotic relationship, which is super cool.
I like that the dichromis being spoken about a little bit more. Like, they're pretty cool fish. They're relatively rare here in New Zealand, but they're a pretty cool fish. So I'm not sure what the status is and how easily they are to get where you are, but yes, I've seen a few.
They're rare and far between, but I have enough that I finally have enough that I'm starting to consider breeding. The problem with them is the sneaker males. So, like, the first 2 I got, I thought, well, this one's got a lyre tail and this one doesn't. Maybe I have a pair. But eventually he decided, oh, no, I'm a male, and grew out his lyre tail as well. So I finally have a batch that I know for sure I have some females in, because the one thing to know for sure is once dichrosis female of the filamentaceous variety, I'm not sure how it works across the other spectrums, is they have bright red pectoral fins after they've bred. So if you have a sneaker male, he'll never get bright red pectoral fins.
Beautiful, really beautiful fish.
They were one of the first ones of my kind of dream fish. So it was super exciting when I finally tracked them down. So, like, I started with a pistos and then learned of dichrosis, and I was like, why don't more people keep these? Like, it's like a dwarf cichlid that you can keep in groups.
Sure. I've got to say, some of the imagery that you've produced on your Instagram for them, very nice as well, and your videos and stuff like that. So,
Thanks.
Lovely little fish, and you're definitely doing them justice. So,
thanks. Well, the Rio Negro ones kind of do all the work for me. They're so gorgeous. Like, I've never seen, like, I've had several species, but the ones that I have a collection point for from the Rio Negro, they have like a kind of like a rusty orange crayon mark down their sides, where I've never seen in any other dichrosis, and it's gorgeous. Cool. So most of mine are females of the Rio Negro one, so I will have to breed them with less pretty ones. Even the less pretty ones are super gorgeous.
So for someone, because you are still very relatively new to doing all of this, so for someone who's just wanting to start in botanical aquariums, what are some of the key elements that you have had to learn and understand to get to where you are now?
Kind of embrace the process. Like, it's let Mother Nature do the work. Like, you're gonna have biofilms, you're gonna have tannins in the water, you're gonna have little critters pop up, and just embrace it. But also, don't do too much too fast. But if you want to do too much too fast, don't add any fish. Like, that's the other tip and trick I'm too impatient to do. So far, I did it in one tank, to just build it up slowly over time. So But if you want to add it all at once, you can add it all at once to a tank that doesn't have any fish. Adds some stuff from your other tanks. You'll get a nice buildup of natural food sources in the water while it's getting ready. But like, yeah, if you have an established tank and you want to add botanicals to it, add them slowly. Like, there's no secret recipe, but if you add too much of something, it can affect things in the wrong way. I'm no scientist, so I don't have all that, but I just know if you're gonna add it to an existing tank, take your time, do it slowly. Yeah. But if you do want to add it all at once, do it all at once without any fish and let the tank establish itself.
Playing around with botanical aquariums really opened my eyes to the difference between a cycled aquarium and like a mature established aquarium, or immature to mature. Like, your filter can be cycled, you can be safe for fish, and you can dump a whole bunch of stuff in there, but like leaving it 6 months or so, the tank itself changes from this young fledgling to an established thing, and the dynamics within it just changes so incredibly much. And like, you can watch the decay on the leaves and the wood and your other bits of botanicals, but it feels right, if that makes sense. Yeah. I'm a fan. You've got me on the hook here. Cool. So how do botanical aquariums differ from, say, traditional planted aquariums? Oops.
I don't know. I enjoy the tint, and like, I find they're lower maintenance. If you do plant some plants in them, they grow slower, so there's less to maintain in there. But I'm still trying to figure out the game. But if you paid attention, you might have noticed a lot more green things sneaking into some of my tanks. So I was also excited to see a lot more rocks in South America, as well as Southeast Asia has so many rocks. So I'm super excited to start bringing more rocks into my scapes as well. So I'm just trying to find ones that aren't going to raise the pH is my issue out here. Like, not many people are doing what I do in the middle of Canada. So I'm a rarity in all things. The fish I keep, the style of tanks I keep, and what I want to put in them is all kind of rare. So there's not a lot of other people doing what I'm doing. So,
so if you were, if somebody was considering setting up a botanical tank, what would be your reasons for trying to get them to set it up? So if you were to try and sell the idea, how would you approach that?
Generally, the way I try and sell the idea is like, look at nature. Like, if you're keeping cardinals and you haven't watched the videos of the Rio Negro of the cardinals where they live, that's what did it for me, was just looking to nature and being inspired by nature and wanting to recreate nature in my tank and the naturalistic behaviors, but also look at how nice those fish look in a tannin stained tank. Like, glow light tetras are completely different in a tannin stained tank as opposed to a clear water tank and stuff like that. Same with cardinals and all the other fish. But let nature inspire people is what I try and do, rather than convince them of other things. But also, like I said before, the flexibility, the ever changing, how you can completely change the look just by adding different botanicals or leaves to the tank.
Cool. I think the availability of the information and the resources now is phenomenal. Like, 10 years ago, it was pretty hard to find, at least visually, other than finding a book, bits and pieces of different river ways. But like, it's all at our fingertips now. There's people that are going out there recording it and documenting it. So it makes keeping botanical aquariums, blackwater aquariums, whatever you want to call them, so much easier now because the information is there. And if you want to try and replicate XYZ, you can dive deep for several weeks getting information and getting it sorted, and the fish respond so much better.
Yeah, Ivan McKelgie's book I picked up kind of at the beginning of January in 2023, and that's basically immediately followed by my first proper botanical method aquarium, where I was inspired by a flooded forest with pencilfish and apistos. So after reading his book, I went hardcore, and that's kind of like the.
Is that the fishes of the Orinoco?
Yeah, that's the one. I'm excited for the flora and fauna one that he's coming up, because that'll be interesting.
As well.
Like, so many people don't even take pictures of the stuff that's around. So like that's what I was like, just take more pictures of the floor. Like, even if it's not a flooded forest, take a picture of where you're walking. Like, that's been my thing, is like, whenever I'm going somewhere, even just here, I'm always looking at the ground. And there's a nice little vignette of what could actually happen in nature and could be in my tank. So that's what I'm like, turn the camera. Who cares about the top of the water? Like, what's that on the floor beside you? Like, just seeing what's there.
The more people that we speak to that are sort of into this style aquarium, the more common theme that is of, I was just looking around and, oh, wow, it was really interesting. It's just like a little patch of something beside a river or on the ground sort of scenario.
Yeah, no, like a lot of things you can't get the exact thing, but to be able to see it visually, to be able to replicate it with the next best thing. Like, I think Scott Fellman from Tannen always says biotype inspired or nature inspired and stuff like that. So like, you're not using the exact gravel or the exact twig, but if you're looking in nature at what is actually there and then just finding the next best thing is kind of the game I try and play. But Ben from Beta Botanicals has been bringing in a lot of stuff, so I've been getting some very specific things from Southeast Asia and stuff like that. So that was super exciting, because like a lot of the other places I have access to wouldn't have pretty much anything from Southeast Asia for me to throw in my Southeast Asian tanks.
What kind of things?
Pardon me?
What kind of things are botanical wise, like items, are specific to Southeast Asia that you wouldn't find anything even remotely close in the South American variety?
Well, there's quite a few. I'm not a botanical specialist, but my go-to would be like a jambola leaf. It's this sort of a shaped leaf. And then there's macarenga, which is supposed to help lower your pH quite a lot, but they're quite monstrous. Like, some of them are like this big a leaf, and they kind of actually remind me of a maple leaf. Like, they have 3 points.
Oh yeah.
They're really nice. But climbing swamp ferns, I don't know if I mentioned that, but those would be my favorite, just texturally. Like, they usually have some branches connected to them and a lot of texture and like a longer leaf and stuff like that. But then there's, bamboo and many other things as well. I feel like I should pull up Ben's website to tell you some more names. But yeah, there's so many, and like Ben's website's pretty good, because he'll list the collection point and stuff like that for where they would occur.
Isn't it just amazing that the aquarium hobby is so many years down the line from the very first introduction to this society, and we're still developing new products for it and new ways to enjoy natural setups. It blows my mind.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much, and then like every botanical has 30 different names, so it depends who's talking about it. So you kind of have to see the visuals in those points as well. I don't know. I think when botanicals first came into the market, even Tannen Aquatics was just giving them names that sounded fun to them. But I think that Ben and Scott had kind of moved more to trying to use more like the Latin names, so that you're actually referring to the plants that they're found on and stuff like that. So.
Just out of curiosity, how many aquariums do you currently have? It's quite hard. Countlessly scroll through your Instagram account. It's quite hard to kind of because all your photos are quite macro on fish. It's hard to
Yeah,
gauge
no,
how many you're working with.
I'm always trying to force myself to back up a little more because I always do really enjoy seeing the space. So I have been trying to give a little bit more fish room vibes and back up, but I really enjoy just getting in there and watching the behavior of the fish. But currently count is about 22, but those are wet. There's now that I've been doing a lot more breeding, I've kind of started with sideways tanks and little 5 gallons at the bottom and stuff like that. So I have a bunch of those that aren't filled but in waiting.
Yeah, yeah.
So probably about
There's-
30 once everything's wet.
Yeah, there's a wee gap there. I can slide another one this way through that position. That'll work. Yeah. Do you think there is a difference between a botanical aquarium and a blackwater aquarium?
Well, blackwater is like a scientific term, like it's been co-opted to just mean a tannin stained tank kind of here, but in the wild it's different. So it just depends which terminology you're meaning. And you were asking the difference between botanical and blackwater. Was that your question? I can't even remember.
Yeah. Do you find, or do you feel there is a difference between botanical and blackwater? And if you do, what are the differences to you?
No, to me they're the same thing. In talking aquariums, like it's just an aquarium that's full of things that will release all their tanninoids, and I think there's like it's so much, but I think Tannin Aquatics has a podcast about what real blackwater is versus like.
You've obviously taken a lot of inspiration from Scott, which I feel is fantastic because I have also taken a lot of inspiration from him. And I listened to that particular podcast several times to really get my mind in line with the way that he was thinking and the way that he was talking with that. Originally, I was like, throw some stuff in the water and it becomes a blackwater tank, but there's more to a blackwater tank than that. And then the botanicals are the other sort of aspect of it, if that kind of makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Nick, what a comment she said. Thanks for the shout out for someone doing Asian blackwater biotope stuff. I end up down a rabbit hole of random channels looking for a wild betta to catch and can't understand a word, but it's super interesting. So, yeah. Why should someone consider a botanical aquarium?
Well, like I said earlier, just if you want to keep your fish in a habitat that's similar to where they would actually live is, I think, the strongest and the reason that I went that direction.
Oh, sorry, I was just typing in the chat then. How do you find botanicals affect the health of fish?
I haven't noticed a difference either way, actually. Like I've always had healthy fish. I do regular weekly water changes, whether it was botanical or not. So like I haven't noticed, like I noticed their behavior is completely different in a botanical method aquarium as opposed to, like an uwagumi where like just surrounded by rocks with nowhere to hide and stuff like that. Like I was like, oh, I saw my CPDs a lot more in that tank, but that's because there was nowhere for them to go.
So what is it about a botanical aquarium that changes the behavior of the fish?
Well, I think it gives them the spaces that they're used to having in nature. So like they have the hiding spaces, which makes them more comfortable to come out. So ideally you would see them more by them having the option of scooting away to the many different spaces that they can. But like my wild bettas, it's so fun just seeing how they interact with like the wood. They'll hide under the shadow of a stick, and like it's a bright red fish, and you totally don't even notice it in the tank when it's just hiding there. Or like how a pencil fish just sits at a branch and hovers. So it just I don't know. It's just so completely different environment and experience to
So it's
view
more
the tank.
the objects and the actual materials as opposed to a chemical reaction with the fish.
Yeah, for me, like I just really enjoy it. But like medicinally, I know nothing. I would say go talk to the fish keeping chill gals, Jen and Nora, I believe. You guys introduced me to them, and I've been talking with Jen because I'm actually from Canada as well. So she mentioned on your podcast that she had some wild bettas, so I reached out to her and been enjoying conversations with her as well. And still pushing for them to start a podcast as well. So I added to you guys.
that fills my cup a million times over.
I think
Some dudes likes
basically they
fish in
could
New
use their
Zealand.
website as a podcast and just have AI read it, their conversations, because it's basically written as a podcast anyway.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
maybe a robot can do your podcast without you.
Yeah. Isn't it cool that some random dude from New Zealand that likes fish spoke to some random dude from Scotland who also likes fish, and all of a sudden we spoke to some people from Canada who also like fish, and then someone else from Canada listened to these people talking to other people talking about fish and got in contact with these people, and now they communicate. How freaking awesome is fish in the aquarium?
Oh yeah, Creekwood Aquatics. I need your help. I just got a culture of Daphnia, so I need some tips and tricks to keep it alive for more than a week. That's another one that I was like, oh, I've never had luck, but I was at an auction this past weekend and picked up a culture of Daphnia, so I'm hoping it'll survive long enough for me to figure out the right way.
Gosh, I love the fish keeping community.
Yeah.
Nick has also asked, plants, have you found any species that work well in black water? Or sorry, maybe even what species have you found that work well?
I'm super paranoid about my fish jumping. Started with the pencilfish because I really enjoy pencilfish and their jumpers. And then now that I'm going down Southeast Asia with the wild bettas, they are crazy jumpers. So make sure you have rocks on your lids as well as fully covering lids. But because of that, where I started with my blackwater tanks was floaters. So I went through frogbit, salvinia, and red root floaters, which I want to try again, but I haven't had luck with any I've tried to bring back. But it's been dwarf water lettuce been the plant of choice for most of my tanks. I find it's a lot more naturalistic under the leaves. So like it kind of gives a really nice atmospheric vibe having the dwarf water lettuce as opposed to like the single strands you get with like a frog bit.
Yeah.
I think salvinia worked better or worked fine, but most of them don't like getting their heads wet. So having a fully enclosed aquarium with water movement, because I do have a lot of flow in most of my tanks. Like most of my wild bettas are mouth brooders, so they're from more active waterways than like the bubble nesting bettas. So dwarf water lettuce is my plant of choice, and that's the first plant I went with in the blackwater realm. I've since been adding crypts and boosts since I went more the Southeast Asia direction, so that opens some more options. I did some Nymphea or I can't even remember the smaller lilies, and those have been were really fun when I had a little clown killifish set up. Those did really well, but super prolific and spread everywhere, and like the root mass was the entire bottom of my aquarium. So when I went to pull them to sell them to someone at an auction, it was more in depth than I was expecting those root systems to be.
Do you guys get dwarf water hyacinth?
No, I don't even know what that is.
It's I suppose it's like water lettuce almost, but it's a floater. But the roots on it are like for a plant that's maybe that in above water. The roots are like probably that for the plant, just tiny, and it spans out quite a bit as well. And they grow just like everything else that floats in the top. But the root systems that you get in them are immense, especially if you've got fry.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool. And they work well in black water as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the benefit of the tan stained water is everything grows a little slower as the light doesn't penetrate as deep and stuff like that. So for me, that's a benefit.
Yeah.
And I find the size of even the floaters will change, but I've had some of my dwarf water lettuce, the size of the top of the leaves would be to fill a whole 5-gallon top. Like
I
so
always
they
get
really fluctuate, but a lot of times they'll be super small as well.
I always get quite jealous of people who are able to get dwarf water lettuce and red root floaters because they're not available here. They're illegal plants. We're left with azolla, duckweed, and Indian fern.
I've successfully kept duckweed out of my fish room thus far, so no invasive
You've kept it
snails
out?
or duckweed. So
All for you for keeping it out.
yeah,
Long may it live. Long may it last.
I have a hardcore paranoid brother who is in the hobby a little stronger than me, so he kind of instilled all his analness to me. So I've been you get only in vitro plants, and if you buy any
So,
fish, make sure you pick out every little last bit before you add them to your tank and whatnot.
so you've also almost got a little bit of generational trauma when it comes to duckweed, some might say.
Yeah, well, I just got strong lessons before I even got into plants.
Yeah.
Like, just keep that out, and if you're gonna try plants, do the dips. But I'm not ambitious enough to ever dip anything, so I was like, I'll just buy in vitro.
Yeah. Next, again, would also like to ask, what ferts do you use that don't shoot TDS up too high to keep your plants happy? Hermos hates her unless she adds ferts, but adding fertilizers mean the fish don't breed.
I'm no expert in ferts. Even when I was trying the planted tank direction, I was very sparse and minimal with my ferts. The only ferts I ever used were the Tropica ones. I don't even remember if it's the green one or the orange one that you use in certain instances. I know one is if you have lots of fish, and the other is if you don't have as many fish. But
yeah.
So I kind of did those kind of, just a simple squirt kind of thing, but very rare and not regularly used. And yeah, like I barely use them. I have still 2 planted tanks remaining that every time I think about it, I'll do a little squirt, but not much. I like things that I don't have to do too much for. So whatever I have is something that'll thrive in my circumstances rather than me trying to adapt to what they would prefer when it comes to plants.
Do you have a preferred? Do you have a preferred botanical that produces a particular color for you? Because obviously they all produce slightly different shade of red or brown or yellow, whichever way you want to kind of look at it. Is there some that you prefer to go with, or because you throw a few different varieties in, it's kind of your own wee color blend?
Not really. Like, it's more dictated on what biotope I'm trying to recreate. So it's more what's the makeup of those, and whatever color that is, it will be. I still get really hesitant when I see a really darkly stained tank. Like, I'm like, is that too much? Did I go too far? So like, whenever I see like those dark red rich tanks, I'm like, it always makes me nervous, even though I know there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different thing. But yeah, no, like I know Botanicals kind of lists the different colors you'll get with the different blends, but it's never been a focus for me. Like, it's more I have a bunch of defaults that I just keep in rotation. Like I pre-botanical my water change water. I'm still hardcore 5-gallon bucket guy. So I have like a bucket of RODI water always ready. And then I'll my default that I would add to that just to get it pre-tinted and ready for water changes would just be a little handful of alder cones and some Catappa leaves, just because those are more readily available. Also, I can locally collect oak leaves that don't look tropical at all. Like they're all wiggly edged leaves up here, but that's what I crumble up and stuff like that. So,
It's like,
those are my three kind of go-to just filler ones that I kind of use universally. It's not biotope specific, but
I've always put birch leaves in my aquariums, and long before I even started doing botanical aquariums, because just through that wall there is a wooded area with a big pond, and it's surrounded by silver birch trees and oak trees and all that kind of stuff. And the leaves, when it gets windy at this time of year, they all just land in my back garden. I can go out and just scoop up loads and loads of them and just put them in my tank. And if I've done it once or twice where I've just had, like, I'm talking like that thick, the leaves at the bottom, and the color you get from them is like a golden color.
Oh yeah.
Can't get off normal botanicals that you buy in the shop. It's just an amazing color. But I totally understand what you're saying, and not trying to achieve the color, but achieve the makeup of the substrate and what's on the substrate, and what will be. Because I guess that that's the most important part. That's the foundation of what you're trying to create.
Yeah, another go-to kind of generic filler that I really love is just like a live oak, or a Texas live oak, sometimes it's called. It's a smaller leaf, but it's, like a smooth edge, so it looks generic tropical. And usually you get a bunch of different sizes at the smaller scale and a bunch of different colorations. So like it's just a really good filler. So like that would be one that I would put pretty much in all my tanks. But then there's some willow oak leaves that are a nice longer, kind of have a more Asian sort of vibe, kind of similar to like a bamboo leaf and stuff like that.
So
there's so much to play with.
You just mentioned that you use RODI water and you preset your tint and stuff like that. Stephen has asked a question which was going to come through my next line of question anyway, is do you use anything to buffer the water so the pH doesn't crash too much if you're using RO?
I haven't done any buffering of my water. I one time did buy like the viscous pH lowering Seachem thing, but I had got scared off by someone. So I usually just start with RODI and let it go where it goes. Like I don't have a lot of fluctuation. My fluctuation is usually it creeps up. So I'm still trying to figure out what I'm adding to the tanks that might be, but I'm not ready for the low pH fish yet. Like I'm still keeping it just at neutral or just below neutral. So I don't think I'm at a point where I'm getting the flux. Like I think once you're below 6.5 or 6 is when you get more of that fluctuation. Like my tanks are pretty even the way I've been doing them.
Mm-hmm.
And usually when I get new fish, nobody keeps them in RODI here. So like I'm trying to recreate what they would have in nature when I'm using that. So I would transition to that slowly. So usually I would have like a treated tap RODI 50-50 mix for when I'm bringing in fish, and then just slowly transition them. So they kind of get the benefits of whatever's in a regular tap water at the start of their cycle or start of their visit to my fish room.
Nice way of putting it. You mentioned that you go and collect some botanicals. What is your method for collection? What do you look for? And once you've collected, what do you do to prime what you've collected, for lack of a better term?
Well, up here in Canada, we don't have a lot of choices. In Saskatchewan, oak is my go-to. We do have maple. I've used some maple twigs, but usually don't use too many maple leaves. I find the oaks just last a little longer and they're plentiful enough. Acorn caps is another one that I would introduce on occasion. And usually I try and default to oak twigs and branches when I can find them. I keep trying to remind myself before it starts to snow, it should be snowing pretty soon, that I need to go collect some more oak leaves to renew my collection in the garage. But so those are my default, is usually just oak. And because it doesn't look very tropical, I'll often just break it up and it'll become, you know, part of the benthic layer and part of the substrate, like mixed in with sand and stuff like that when I use oak. But it's really gorgeous. Like, I have just thrown it in some tanks just to enjoy the look of it. Like, there's a lot of people that would do it and embrace it, even though it's not tropical looking. But
oak leaves seem to deteriorate in a really beautiful way because of the shape of the leaves, and it's like they go through like a 3-stage, like they almost change color, and then they crack up, and then they break down to the skeletal stage.
Yeah, and then you get the Madagascar lace look of the leaves as well, which I was trying to dig up some old pictures, and I had some nice ones where there was fish behind the leaves and in front, and it was really gorgeous. But as for prep, I'm pretty hardcore. I think I follow kind of Tannen's instructions, or Ben from Botanicals. I think I boil my stuff a little longer, but basically I'll rinse everything. First off, when you're collecting, collect from an area that you know is safe to collect from, like far from roadways or far from anywhere that would be sprayed with anything. Most of the places I collect from are like clearly safe in all ways. Like, I know like whether there's been anything sprayed and stuff like that. So I'm pretty particular about the places I would collect or use stuff from. And then after I've collected safely, then I would rinse everything, and then I usually give it at least an hour boil. Some people will do 5 minutes. I'm a little more hardcore, but also you want to do a longer boil. Like, I usually have, I just throw everything into one pot. I have a pretty big cauldron, about 15 inches by 15 inches. It was pickling season up here, and there were some pots on sale, so I upsized my used to be big pot to an even bigger one that can eat the other one. So I usually just toss everything together, so it'll be leaves, seed pods, twigs, and everything. So with like twigs and seed pods, if you want them to sink, you'll have to do a longer boil. So usually I do that, and then I just let it naturally cool, so that also. And then after that, sometimes I'll leave it overnight. I would drain the water, add new water, and drain it again. I've never been one for using the stew juice, because basically you would be adding what you're trying to clean off the leaves to your tank, whereas there's plenty of tannins in the botanicals. I've never had a shortage. But yeah, like if you're running out of tannins in your tank, just add more leaves. Like, that's kind of my gauge. But also, like, you're supposed to have ebb and flows. Like in the wild, you want some clean water coming in. So like a lot of the time I'll do water changes with just the straight RODI water, like not with the pre-tint added, but I kind of have both at the ready. So usually it's just when I'm being lazy, because my tinted water is in a 5-gallon bucket, and my regular RODI water is in a jug. So the jug is easier to pick up and pour in. So, but that can also help to instigate breeding and stuff like that, as well as just doing clear water change. So you can have some ebb and flow in the depth of your color as well. Like, I don't think you need to shoot for having it this brown all the time. And yeah, it's interesting to see your fish in all the different iterations as well.
For sure. We've had a couple of comments that we will bring up. First of all, Bit of Botanical said this is such a great stream. I 100% agree. I'm loving all of this. It's right up my alleyway. It's spinning my wheels in any other words you want to say. So awesome sauce. Stephen has said, I use older cones and oak leaves for tanning the water and a little bit of oyster shell because my water is naturally soft here in Scotland. So we would have a tip or a bit of help for people that
I'm always jealous of all those naturally soft waters. Ours is basically Lake Tanganyika water here. So
my water, obviously, I know, Stephen, my water comes out at 16 TDS pre-filter. I use an arrows, which there's not much point in using an arrow, but when I was running a reef tank, I was checking it on the TDS meter and it was coming out at 16 ppm before.
Wow.
It's wild.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cichlid, like South or Central American and African cichlid keepers up here, but not as many keeping soft water.
Mm-hmm.
We've had another question from Max, or a question from Maxie. She has asked, someone recently tried to tell her that you shouldn't put catapa stems in tanks. Do you have any thoughts on this theory? Or anybody else may have thoughts on that theory?
No, I know nothing. I would defer to Ben or Scott to answer that sort of a question, but I like whatever comes attached to the leaf, I've never like pulled out the middle. I haven't had any issues.
I wouldn't have thought that it would have any ramifications either, but
like catapa bark is used regularly as well. So like I feel like you're basically using everything anyway. So
I mean, I've got bags of catapa chips, which is the leaves that are curled in and they curl round the stem, and I put them in, and the stem is the last bit to break down, and it takes a long time compared to the leaf, but they do break down, and shrimp and bristlenose eat them, so I've never had any issue with that at all.
Like, I would have assumed, like, not all plants are the same or trees are the same, but like the leaf with the stem is still sort of part of the leaf. Like some trees will have, this is safe, this particular part isn't.
Yeah.
But the leaf and the stem is kind of one and the same, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't have thought there'd be an issue with that, but I wouldn't have known. I don't know. I've always thrown them in without any hesitation, and I probably will continue to do so.
Yeah, my problem with catapa leaves is the falsely rounded edges a lot of them come with. I'm like, I don't want a circle. I want a natural shaped leaf. So I'm always offended by the pre-cut edges of a lot of catapa leaves. I was like, if they're not circle edged in the wild, I don't want them. So
are they not rounded?
Just bust up.
Are they pre-cut? Are they not naturally that round?
If they have if your catapa leaf looks like this, like if it's got a rounded end, that end is cut. Blackwater or bwaquatics.id is actually in the, I can't remember where he's located specifically, but he actually collects and prepares leaves in the wild. So it was a really fun find on Instagram to just kind of see like him out in the wild and ironing leaves so that they're flat and hanging them all around to naturally dry them. Like there's so much process and work in the collection and keeping and storing, and they have like a cutter.
I genuinely did not know that they were cut. I thought that they were like a natural sort of round shape. Like I think
it's more of a natural shape like this, like maybe a little less, but if you have a sharp rounded edge, as far as I know, that's not natural.
Maybe we don't get them here. Like I'm just trying to think of all the ones that I've opened and looked at. I don't really recall ever seeing that. So maybe that process doesn't happen to the ones that we get over here.
It must be something to do with packaging and processing, because when they're gathering all these leaves to dry them and cure them and pack them and then ship them, it must be easy to just keep them all the same shape.
I think it's
possibly.
Yeah. What I'd be wanting is the cut-offs, because that'd be far bit more. That'd look much better having all the bits that they cut away scrumpled up and put in your tank. That'd be far nicer.
Well, that's what I do with the ugly round ones anyway. Yeah. Just crumple them up and put them in my tank.
Sorry, and I'm chatting in the chat. Sorry. Okay.
I wanted to
Fire
read
away.
it. Sorry. Obviously, people, you've got people that breed fish, and they can do it in without black water or botanicals, and they do it a certain way. But the process is different when you've got a natural aquarium that's full of botanicals because the fish are in a different environment. Is breeding fish something that you've approached purposefully, or is it a kind of side fringe benefit of having such a natural based aquarium?
Well, I started out my fish room kind of more inspired by like like I'm an artist and graphic designer, so the gallery kind of vibe is where I started. So I had always planned on just being like, this is my flooded forest tank and fully filled with stuff that would occur in a flooded forest.
Mm-hmm.
So the breeding part has just been an evolution because of providing that natural environment. I've been getting breeding.
Okay.
So, but then there's also like with the Southeast Asian, like the wild bettas, uh, it's the males that hold the eggs and incubate them in their mouths for like 21 days. So if you keep the male and female in the same tank for too long, she can burn out your male just by her constant wanting to breed. So the males will need some time to recuperate. So like I've been considering other ways of breeding just to kind of give breaks. Like originally I went in as I want to set up a biotope and I want it to be colony spawning. If fry happens, it happens, but I'm not trying to pull holding things or squeeze out eggs or do any of that sort of stuff. It was my original mandate, was more just like let nature happen. If there's more fish in your tank one day, that's exciting, but I'm not trying to maximize fry survival. But
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of gotten more into the like, nobody keeps any of the fish I keep around here. So I'd like to, maybe have some more stay alive that I can spread around so that more people get exposed to them and interested and excited about them as well. Like I've since after COVID, when the aquarium clubs opened back up again, I immediately joined the aquarium club. So I think being part of the aquarium club and having other like-minded people to share the hobby with, and also you want to share the fish with them as well. So
do you find that with like the extra leaf blitter and things like that, you have a slightly higher survival rate over like the slightly cleaner, more sterile type of vibe?
well, I had fry show up equally in my other tanks, but there was a lot of plants. So I think it's more the hiding spaces that you're providing. Like the one little secret trick that I didn't know, it was just more happenstance, is challah wood is a great place for fry to hide. So I had some challah wood in a betta ocellata tank, so one of the big Una maculata bettas, so like a 4 to 6 inch kind of snakehead looking fish. Sadly, I lost the male because after he spat the fry, he decided to jump ship, even though I had a very tightly sealed tank. But there were 45 fry in there with a big female, and they all survived. I pulled her quickly after he had jumped. I actually noticed the fry after he had jumped. I found him dried up on the floor, and then I walked up to the tank to feed the female and noticed a bunch of fry. So quickly swooped in and got her out and maximized fry survival. But I think a reason for that fry survival was the challah wood. So it was just kind of hiding underneath my other stuff. But I think having that extra security of being able to jump inside of the wood.
Is that, do you get that wood, Cam? Because it's something that's usually associated with shrimps.
Yeah, I
that's
don't.
why I had it.
You know what
But
it
yeah,
is?
it's like the inside of a cactus. So it's like a long, like it's like bamboo, but imagine bamboo with like a whole bunch of holes drilled in every side.
If it had a skill.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
thought I knew like I did just Google it, and I thought what you were talking about was what you were talking about, and it was. But no, we don't get the natural wood here. We get ornaments like that, but we don't get the actual original wood here. Maybe I will shoulder tap one of the importers and see if they can do anything, because they've recently begun bringing in a whole lot of different botanicals. So I might shoulder tap them and see if they can potentially help with that, because it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it lasts a long time as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
After I joined my aquarium club, I made friends with someone in the club that has a 3D printer. So he's been making a lot of my 3D printing dreams come to life. And that's one of the things on the list, is to just do a 3D printed kind of chala wood thing that, like, it would just be hiding under the leaf litter and twigs and whatnot anyway. But I just thought, as an added little hideout for fry, it could be a way of prolonging survival until they're a decent size anyway. So
cool. We had a comment here. The Indian guy with fish says, "Hey Ryan, I finally get to put a face to the name. Always saw the Blackwater tank photos."
Yeah, my face hasn't been out there too much. Or my voice. This is the first time they're hearing my voice as well.
Cool.
You don't even get to see my hands like Luau.
So the question is, are you going to start a podcast now?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the things have just been to the things I want to do are just because I didn't see it when I was getting into it. So I just kind of wanted to create what I wanted to see. So I have been considering maybe a podcast or YouTube and stuff like that, but it's just finding the time and then changing all my videos to horizontal, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's mostly so I can talk to people like you, or like going to fish room visits, but with people across the world. So I think it would just be a really good excuse to tap other people to get all their knowledge.
I have
to be able to share it as well. So, but I
I've
think
got
it
a
would be more geared
solid
towards
admiration for anybody who uses multiple platforms for different content, but the same content. Like, for what it takes, like I said, to go from horizontal to vertical, to take a photograph, to be doing all of them and doing them well is always quite impressive. So,
well,
totally understand that.
Fish Lab gave a pretty good tip. I liked his idea of when he was talking about how he makes a YouTube video on your podcast here, to record the audio first and then pull your content to go with the audio. So like that way you can dictate the content, but as well as the timing and stuff like that. So that's a little trick that I was like, oh, maybe if I simplify it in that way, it would be less daunting. Like I've been trying to film fish room videos for our club. So I've been visiting club members and taking videos of their fish room, but trying to sort through the content, like, because I kind of did like, let's back it up and kind of show an overview of the fish room, and then I'll go in and do macro shots of all the inhabitants and stuff like that. But then trying to pair the pulled out stuff with all the macro is a dog's breakfast. So like, even just kind of video in the order you kind of want to present it. So like, that would just make cutting it up. So like, any tips and tricks like that was the big strong takeaway that I really enjoyed from when Llewellyn was on your head.
One of the first things that my daughter showed me when she does TikTok, she makes the video and then does a voiceover, and then kind of chunks down the video into sections and does a little bit of voice for different sections, and then pulls it all together so that it's flowing.
Yeah.
It works for some kinds of videos, but for certain other things, it wouldn't work where fish are concerned. But yeah, it's a really easy way of doing it.
It's funny after
talking head type of video, like MD fish tanks. I feel like it's more Lowell Fish Lab. I was like, I want to know about the fish. I want to see in the tank. I want to see the layers and whatnot more than I want to see the back of your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny after after we spoke to him and he said that that's how he does his videos. Being an avid TikTok consumer, unfortunately, I've gone, hey, I wonder if these people are doing it the same way, just recording it all, then speaking, and then adding to it because it makes so much sense. And I spoke to a couple other people afterwards and said, give this a go, and they've sort of adjusted the way they do their content, and it comes out really, really good. It was just a great little silver tidbit there.
Super great little tip.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he might have changed a lot of people's lives without realizing.
Yeah, I've been sharing it with a lot of people.
Obviously, there is like botanical additives and stuff like that in the aquariums that come in liquid form in bottles. Like Tropical does various different blackwater additives. Do you have an opinion on them? Do you use them? How do you find them if you do use them?
There's a Sarah one called Blackwater Aquatan that I've tried, but usually it's just aesthetic. If I want to, like, all of a sudden make the water a little darker for a photo, or just to kind of get the vibe I want as a cheat when I'm just too lazy to boil botanicals. But a lot of people are doing like botanical tea these days. So like, I know Canon Aquatics had one at one point, but better botanicals, and I think even Seachem might have a botanical tea now as well. But
yeah,
basically it's just
mushed up botanicals in a tea bag. So you can do those yourself as well with your own little tea bag. But if you want to do it, just do it yourself. Like, I was at a talk by Hans George Evers last weekend, and he uses black tea, which I was surprised by. I had never heard someone using black tea, but he makes a concentrate. So you could probably do that with proper botanicals as well. So like if you have locally collected oak or whatever, like you could make a concentrate yourself if that's what you're after. But Hans's suggestion was just to boil it for a very long time, and then you want to like let it simmer like a sauce or whatever. So like the water evaporates, and then you're just left with a dark, saturated tannin bomb. So, but that's what he uses. He uses the black tea as just for his breeding tanks. Like he was talking about breeding tetras was the presentation I saw. So there's lots of great tips by Hans, and a really nice guy as well.
Cool. Where are we at? We've been going, I was going to say a word that I shouldn't use then for a second. We've been going totally unscripted for a little while, which is always fun and games.
Oh, are there words I shouldn't be using?
Cool. A lot of these we have already kind of touched base of without even realizing. John, save me here. Ask a question off the top of your head while I find one that we haven't gone through yet.
Okay. If somebody was sitting down in front of you and saying, look, I want to set up a blackwater tank or a botanical tank, tell me what to do. What would be your simplest process for somebody that's never even set an aquarium up before?
Well,
like, what's the simplest form of setup advice for a botanical aquarium?
Well, come here, get a bag of sponge grunge from me that I'll squeeze out of one of my sponges, fresh just for you. That would be my default for any tank setup, is a big old juicy bag of all that gross stuff that's in your sponges. So that's usually my starting point for most of my tanks, because I'm lazy and then don't really want to wait for a tank to cycle. So most of the time I'll just pilfer from many tanks to make a new tank. So I'll pull leaves, twigs, botanicals from established tanks, as well as a heaping scoop of sponge grunge, as I call it. I don't know if it has a more proper term, but like if you want to set up a little feeding culture, apparently if you just squeeze some of that sponge grunge into a bucket of water and let it sit, magic will occur, and you'll have some stuff to feed your fry as well.
Imagine that, definitely. Cam done a test a while back about the quickest and safest way to establish new aquariums, comparing it to like using bacterial additives, or one of the methods was the sponge from another aquarium, and that was the one that actually came out the most successful.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, newbies, I would give them a bag of sponge grunge.
I like that term, sponge grunge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down for that. Sponge grunge.
And then I would say more or less the same as I would like start with the substrate. Don't just consider the one thing you see in one bag to be enough. Like think of all the things and layer it all together and start from there rather than it just being like the shiny, ugly, glossy, fake rocks that they have at pet stores.
When you set up an aquarium, do you have an idea in your mind of how you want it to look, what stocking you want, or just go, I want to replicate XYZ area, and then just sort of begin and go hunting at fish shops and all this fish will fit what I want, this one doesn't? How does that process work for you?
I've been less hardcore once I went to kind of more the black water direction. I feel like it's more just based on my materials that dictates what my skates look like, and then it's the layering over time that builds them up into what they are. But it's really dependent on what I'm starting with. So like it's my oak twigs and stuff are getting pretty sparse in the garage, so like everything's getting a little thinner and more spindly branches and stuff like that. So I definitely need to find more, but usually it's just based on what I have to start with that will reflect what my tanks look like. But I do enjoy the idea of a little more plotting and planning, but I try and vary the layout of my tanks, but I'm inspired by flooded forests and palm swamps and stuff like that. So it's more trying to replicate things falling in. So that's kind of usually my goal is to recreate that. But then I still think of the rules of thirds and stuff like that. And like, whether you're doing an islandscape or like a triangular shape. So just for me to have that variation in the layouts of the tanks when they're next to each other. So like I'm still a designer at heart, so the aesthetics are always there for me anyway, even if I'm still just trying to make it look like everything fell. But yeah, no, like I just have never built up that big of a hardscape reserve to have the time or whatever to strategize with this style of tank. But yeah, it's always inspired by the fish I'm keeping. But so many fish, like I was saying earlier, is like a flooded forest in South America is no different than a flooded forest in Canada or a flooded forest in Southeast Asia. Like the building blocks are very similar. So I find where you're detailing, like that's why, I can pull a bunch of stuff from 3 different tanks to make a new tank as the building blocks, and then the layering of like the Southeast Asian specific botanicals, seed pods, leaves, and whatnot is what changes the look there, like adding palm fronds as opposed to like big juicy leaves is a completely different look. So like, palm fronds I find fall apart so fast. Because I run hang on the backs at the moment, so they've been crazy filling up of my sponges, and I had one tank that overflowed out of the hang on back. So I've been looking into other methods for keeping those tanks, but yeah, just got to be more hardcore with the sponges, or just to remove the sponges altogether and just have it as a water mover. Might be better, but I've been looking into getting air in the fish room and doing many different options for adding air to a botanical method aquarium.
I like palm fronds because, like I said, they break down pretty quickly. The leaves break down fast, and you're left with the stalky bit, which breaks down but takes a bit more, and it kind of leaves like a skeleton in the tank. And as it, like, I really like the whole, and when it's complete, I'm a big fan of using them and just watching them do their
I
thing.
love it. They're the most gorgeous tanks, but both those tanks I also have pleco, like ancestors plecos, so it might be their poops that are clogging the filter more, like eating the wood and pooping it out. That might be the issue as well. So, but yeah, no, the look of a palm fronds and tanks is gorgeous, and when you have like a nice sea of that golden glow of all the leaves before they break down. One trick I heard on, I think it was the Watercolors Aquarium podcast, they mentioned that you can put your palm fronds in, and then if you're hardcore, before they start to break down, take them out, dry them off, and then put them back in, and they'll double their life or triple their life. Like, you can, as far as they said, you could do it indefinitely, but like I said, I'm not that hardcore in a lot of the process games like that. I would just add new ones.
Interesting. We've had a question of the floor. Ethan would like to know, is it necessary to boil botanicals?
I don't know if it's necessary. I think if you are aware of your collection point and have tested your leaves and know that they are safe and clean, then I wouldn't hesitate to add, like I do add leaves, but the reason I boil it is because I'm paranoid and I want to make sure I don't add anything I don't want in my tanks. So that's why I do it, and also because it makes everything safe. So those, like, but it's more the safety method for me. Like, you can boil it for 5 minutes. You don't have to do it as long as me. But the reason I go long is just because I have everything mixed together. I'm not just boiling leaves, or I'm not just boiling other things.
Well, it helps it all sink down.
Yeah. So like the sinking is like the big selling point, unless like if I had mouth brooding bettas or something that needs a floating leaf at the top of the water, then I would consider it. But it's more just to get everything down in its resting place quicker.
Mm-hmm.
But also for the safety of, like, if you're not personally collecting your leaves and botanicals, you don't know what. So just that added safety measure, but I don't think it's necessary. If you test it and are sure that there's nothing on there, if you were to just add them directly. So like that would be my concern. So I wouldn't make a blanket statement that just throw it all in, but there's no harm in either way. Like in nature, that's all that happens, is it falls off the leaves or off the trees and into the water. So you would be replicating nature that way as well. So it just, if you don't know where your stuff is coming from, I do that extra safety measure.
We've had another question. Have we discussed peat usage yet? We haven't. Do you use peat in your aquariums?
I use cocoa coir. It's often used as a peat substitute, so it's kind of very peat-like, derived from coconut stuff. I'm not sure what all it is, but you can usually buy it in nice little bricks in like the terrarium section of most pet stores. A lot of people will use that instead of peat for killifish eggs. It dries out a lot quicker, so like peat retains the water more like a sponge, whereas like the cocoa coir, if you are doing it for like dirt spawning kind of killifish and stuff like that, the benefit is it dries out a lot quicker. So when you're drying out the eggs to store, it's a lot faster. So I've used that as my default. I have had some peat, like I posted my Betachinoides / Bararis maculatus tank, the 3-spot Rasboras recently, and that is the only tank that I've added peat moss into the substrate, just because it's rare and can't be sustainably collected and stuff like that. So if I do add it, I would add it sparingly, just because of the how long it takes to form in the wild.
Mm.
So it would more be ecological reasons that I would recommend against it. But I know a lot of people use it, and a lot of breeders will add it into like a box filter just to help to progress. But there's so many other botanicals out there. If you're just looking to lower the pH and stuff like that, check out any of the botanical websites. I know Ben from Botanicals will go into like Macaranga leaves, like Macaranga is I think it's collected in Indonesia or Borneo and stuff like that. That'll help lower the pH. So there's other ways to lower the pH. It's the pH lowering that you're after with peat. But I find, sometimes you're recreating a peat environment is where I would consider it more, rather than just the old school ways of doing things or whatnot, because there's so many alternatives that could be used these days.
Your Instagram page is an absolute work of art. For those that have not checked it out, I highly suggest you do it. It is beautiful. You have said you're a graphic designer or work with graphics. Do you have photography background as well?
Photography has always just been kind of a hobby. It's been what fuels my art or graphic design. So like it's ever since the invent of digital cameras, I find was more interested in it, because I can just take a bazillion pictures. Like my dad is hardcore printer of photos still. So whenever I use his camera, I take about 20 different shots of the same thing so that I could choose one, but he would print all 20 to go in his photo album. So with the invent of digital, I've really enjoyed it, but I've never been too hardcore into the nuts and bolts and the ISO, and like I'm not a hardcore photographer, but a hobbyist photographer. But for me, yeah, it's just taking so many pictures and then getting rid of most of them and narrowing it down to just a few.
Mm-hmm. What's your process for that? Do you actively go out and say, today I'm going to take photos of XYZ aquarium and I'm going to try and capture XYZ fish? Or are you kind of just in the moment, got the camera out, walking around, this is looking good, and then once you've got your photos, how do you go through your editing process, and how does that work for your Instagram account?
Well, at first I felt like I needed to take it in the moment. Like, so a lot of my stuff at the beginning was like, it's the day of and it's posted that day. Whereas lately I've been more batching. And I used to be more hardcore about lighting and such. Lately I've been kind of not even bothering, but I used to have like little black gloves, and I would wear a dark shirt, and I'd turn off all the lights in the room except for the tank I'm photographing. But I've never used flashes or anything. It's always just been the natural light, like the natural light that's on the tank that lights my images. So, but I found I've been able to get away without getting too much glare and reflection. But if I ever want to take like a dedicated one, I would definitely just darken the room. The black gloves is a really good trip, or have a black phone or a black camera as opposed to a gray or white when you're dealing with photos is a huge huge thing to just limit the reflection. But having a couple sheets of black foam core around that you can just use to block the light, or even to just block the top of the tank so that the light from the tank isn't shining on my face, which is reflecting in the tank. So a lot of it's just been trial and error, and get it as shadowy as you can. If you're hardcore, turn off every light, close all the windows, and just do the one tank and dedicate it. So, but yeah, like I was taking some pictures for Ty Streetman's book, and I just spent an evening just taking pictures of necrosis, filamentasis. I think I took 2,000 images that night, and there were 200 that I saved, but I don't think 200 that I would ever post.
So it's a lot of bulk, but batch photos is something I've learned a lot of people do, and it's been very nice to have like a stockpile. Like, so I still have lots of videos that I shot of tanks, but I've been just like finding the time to edit them into a reel and whatnot. But most of my edits are just done on my phone. Like, I'll do all the color correcting on my phone, and the reels I just do in the Instagram app. So it's just edited directly in there. Like, if I'm doing a video, I'll chop it up into bite-sized bits that I want to use from like take a 5-minute video and chop that out in the interesting bits. And then basically, because it's filmed in a 5-minute stretch, it has some continuity throughout the video, just by, so basically once I have this 5-minute that I cut up into, like 10 different little snippets, I put it together in the same order as I've filmed it, so that it kind of has like a seamless feel, even if it's all many different shots of the same thing, then the lighting and everything. So I'll color correct the main 5-minute chunk so that the color correction, but then you can chop up the other stuff just within. So that's how I've kind of gotten with my videos, is it's been more just try and do one big chunk and then take little snippets out of it.
Yep. I didn't even know that Instagram had an app that you could edit in. So yeah, cool.
And the other thing that I learned only recently for quick edits for photos, like if you are taking a bunch of photos, there's a nice little circle in the top right-hand corner of like I use an iPhone. So when you're editing a photo, there's a circle with 3 little dots in the middle. If you click on there, after you've edited a photo, you can say copy edits, and then you can paste those edits into the next photo that you took in the same session.
Cool.
So that's a nice little cheap workaround that I only discovered recently. But
nice. Is it only Instagram that you're currently on as far as social media goes?
I tried TikTok for a bit, but I just didn't find any content that appealed to me there. So I find Instagram is where I want to spend my time. So that's where I wanted to create the content for. Like YouTube, I've been spending a lot more time on as well for visual content. Like, I don't use YouTube for podcasts or anything like that. Like, podcasts like this, I would rarely watch on YouTube. It's more, I want something to play in my ears while I'm busy fish tanking. Like, and unless you pay for YouTube, you can't have the video turned off and in your pocket while you're listening.
Yeah, that is a pain. Yeah, they've got us there. They know what we want, and they're not going to give it to us without paying for it.
Yeah, it's worth it. No adverts either.
How do you work through maintaining your aquariums? Do you have a routine for that? You mentioned earlier that sometimes you do just a complete clear water change. How often are you adding new botanicals? Like, how does that sort of work for you?
I try to do about a 10% water change weekly, but I'm pretty bad at the consistency. So it's usually probably a 10% water change every couple weeks. I clean the front glass, but usually leave the sides and back as nature does with them, just because I do have a lot of tanks that have fries. So unless I can see it, I don't really worry too much about it. And then also, if you do wipe it, then you have to do the whole side. Mostly it's been sideways tanks. Like I said, I started breeding more things, so I have some more, closer to the ground and, sideways. So like I only see a small portion of the tank. So those ones I'm even less worried about what the sides look like, and the ones that are still set up kind of at countertop height
and more gallery-like, I will do a little bit more cleaning of side glass, but generally I just default to the front of glass, except for in my 2 rimless tanks. I'll do a little more cleaning in those just because.
Have you found there's any challenges to keeping a botanical set up over like a standard clear water aquarium, or do you find them easier to maintain?
For me, I find it's easier, but I'm also embracing everything that everybody else is scared of. Like everybody, as soon as they see biofilm pop up on the wood, they're wanting to scrub it off with a toothbrush. And, you know, every time MD Fish Tank gets a little bit of brown in his water, he runs for the bushes and is so offended by the color in the water, even though he's been trying to do a lot more things. I always find it's funny when people are running away from the little bit of tannins that occur naturally in a tank. So, but no, I really enjoy it, and I find, yeah, it's less so.
What's your take on like filament algae when a new aquarium's setting up? You know, that stuff.
Like the brown stuff, like the, I don't even know what it's called.
Diatoms?
I've never done much with anything. Like the one thing that's been bothering me is I have been getting towards the top of tanks is just blackbeard, but even the blackbeard in a botanical method aquarium doesn't really look wrong. Like every time I think my tanks are looking shoddy and weird, then I see some pictures of them in the wild and I'm like, no, that looks right.
like there is the blackbeard and everything is like, so like whenever I'm for adding botanicals, it's just kind of when I feel like it looks like it's time, like it just for a refresh. Like there's a different vibe in your tank when you let it go long enough that you don't have any new stuff falling. So like it gets darker, like it's a much darker vibe in your tank. So I find adding the golden hues of fresh leaf litter and stuff like that is really fun. So like it's just a feel. Like when I was like, it's time to add some more, and when I do it, I add it to everywhere. So I just throw everything in the pot that I would want, and then I just kind of dig through it as I'm pulling it out of the rinsed water at the end, and they're like, well, so you get some of this. And so sometimes I don't have quite what I want for every tank, but I kind of try and go in with a little bit of a plan, but not too much. I'm not a lot of strategy.
I find personally that doing botanical aquariums are far less stressed than clear water, because like you said, natural things like biofilms will just kind of occur and you're not like, oh, I need to get in there and clean it off. It's like, that is just part of what it is that I was trying to achieve.
And it's free
And
fish
a
food.
random thing will just turn up and it's like, cool, okay, there's a bit of algae there. It's not, not taking over the aquarium. It is just a natural wee thing. I still keep up with my water changes, so the water itself is still in good condition, but it just is allowed to do what it does. Other than blackbeard algae, I still hate that stuff and I don't want to anywhere near anything. But like, cool, there's a bit of string algae. Cool, there's a bit of whatever. It's okay. It's not the end of the world.
Exactly. Yeah, no, and like so much of it is just free food for your fish, and
Exactly.
like the biofilm's embraced by the shrimp breeders, but it has not been embraced by many fish keepers as of yet. I think a lot of the success for breeding in a botanical method aquarium is due to the leaves and botanicals and embracing the detritus, the biofilms, the breakdown of the materials. That's all food for your fish or food for your fish. So like all the little critters that pop up in a botanical method aquarium become the food, and then they eat the stuff that everyone's scared of. So yeah.
Do you have any specific filtration method that you prefer to align with your botanical aquariums?
Well, most of my tanks are run on hang on the back filters. So I've just been using aqua clears, like the old school aqua clears of varying types. But like I mentioned before, the sponges do get pretty bunged up. So I've been looking into alternative methods, but I find the filtration method I want is something that's not on the ground, because I don't want to disturb the benthic layer. Like I want to keep the detritus and everything down there. So matten filters had always appealed to me because they're in the tank, so the risk of failure is very minimal. The risk of failure in a matten style filter is your sponge is so clogged that the one side dries up, but if the one side dries up, the other side's still wet, and your air doesn't care if it's got water to blow through or not. So I've been looking into methods to do a internal matten style filter that works in a botanical method aquarium. So I've been investigating lots of different ways. Like I know Canon Aquatics prefers like an all-in-one style filter where you have like the separate area at the back where water can flow through, and you can do some stuff back there. But yeah, like I've just been trying to minimize the amount of things I have plugged in. So I've been investigating more like the linear piston air pump, air powered filters, and then going down the matten filter wormhole. So like I've done a couple 3D printed iterations where it's kind of more like a hang on the inside matten filter, where it's just hangs at the back of the tank, but it's a 3D printed box that has openings on the sides and the front and the bottom, so that the sponge can suck from 4 sides.
Yeah.
And then you can still throw the water over, so you can get the flow and filtration that you would get from any sponge sort of filter, but it's up and out of the way at the back. And then I've been also investigating the idea of doing more of a matten style box filter. So, but also with my wild bettas, I'm worried about them swimming into the area when you're servicing the sponge. So I've been trying to get my friend to 3D print me kind of a container where you can do a matten style filter, but without the full sponge being exposed, so that when you're servicing the filter, you don't have to worry about fish swimming into the area and stuff like that. But matten's kind of the way I'm investigating, but for now I'm using pre-filters on my hang on the backs, and just a regular, like I have a sachet of matrix and just regular sponges in those aqua clears at the moment. But then I have just some traditional sponge filters at the bottom of my tank with like the matten style uplifts. So like the same uplift tubes my friend 3D prints, like, but same as a Swiss Tropicals or matten style filter idea.
Yeah. I'd love to do a matten filter again, but at least here in New Zealand, I find it almost impossible to find sheets of foam that is longer than 50 centimeters. And if you want to do a long, like have the face of the aquarium facing up, they're generally 2 foot long. So it doesn't quite seem to work. Like you can put them on the side, and I'm struggling with that. And also you reminded me that I've got to go find some sponge for my sump today. So I appreciate the reminder that you didn't know that you just gave me.
Yeah, no, the box filter idea, you can just have a sponge block. And basically it could just be a little container. At the bottom, you can put biomedia like below the sponge. So you can even introduce biomedia into like a box style matten filter. So you can use smaller pieces but still get the same effect. Or even there's like tower matten filters where basically you have your uplift tube in the center of a square block of sponge. So it could just be a tower. So there's lots of different iterations. Like Swiss Tropicals is the website I had used for inspiration. He's, I think, formerly from Switzerland, but based out of America now. I think he runs the English version of Amazonas magazine. Oh, you guys had him on.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So him. But if you look at his website, at the box style is kind of the method I've been looking into lately. So I have a 3D printed one. I just didn't have enough air tubes or enough air things to run it, to test it out, to see if there's any mods I want to make. But basically it would have an overflow at the top, and it would have cutouts on the side where the sponge is, but then big fish wouldn't be able to swim into it while I'm pulling the sponge to service. But the reason I like sponge filters is you don't have to service them that much.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like.
Everything comes down to me being lazy.
I like that. I'm not a massive fan of sponge filters, but I can totally understand the lack of maintenance to do them. I'm on for a bit of that.
But yeah, no, I don't like the noise of a traditional sponge filter where it's bubbling at the top, but the Matten style uplift tubes have really fixed that for me.
We were just talking before about biofilms, and if I'd paid any attention to the questions that were coming up, that was basically the next question to come through, and I should have paid attention to that. Biofilms in botanical tanks. You're obviously pro them. What are they, and what can they help you achieve?
All I know is that they're good for the stuff that lives in your tank. Scientifically, I don't know exactly what they are, why they occur, but I know they occur on most things. There's some botanicals that are much more susceptible to a bigger buildup of them, but it's pretty much on everything. But it's not just on the botanicals or leaves or twigs. It's on the side of your tank and the walls, and every surface of everything in your tank has biofilm. So like it's there whether you see it or not.
Yeah.
It's just not often embraced when you can see it.
Yeah. Are there any specific botanicals that you know promote beneficial bacteria or a stronger lot of bacteria for your aquarium?
No, I don't know too much about any of that or anything that would help with it.
Cool. And we've had another question off the floor. Little Botanicals has asked if we've talked about fish foods, which we haven't yet. A lot of the fish you've mentioned are sort of small micro predator type fish. Do you have a specific diet that you feed them? Are you into sort of live cultures and that sort of stuff as well, or are you just off the shelf pre-packed sort of
Most of my
diet?
fish are similarly sized, so I kind of give everybody almost the same diet. But my diet is usually a very mixed diet. So like I have a lot of Sarah foods and Sarah fry foods. I kind of default to Sarah, but I have used some bug bites and stuff as well. But Sarah's got a bug bite type item as well. So that would be my dry food options. I picked up Igapo Rapashi that I haven't given a go yet. Rapashi is one of the feeding options I haven't tried, but I heard it's really good for pistos and other grazers. So they
Have something that can be in the tank and that they can eat when they want to eat rather than when you want to feed it to them. So I've been excited about that. Hans was showing, or no, I don't think it was Hans. I think it was Lee Newman. He used to be the curator of the Vancouver Aquarium Society. And he was just mixing up Rapashi and painting it onto rocks because he got some fish that really prefer eating algae off rocks, and the algae that he had bulked onto the rocks in advance of getting the fish. I can't remember what fish it was.
Probably some sort of loricarid. But he was just mixing up a batch and painting it on with a brush as a way of feeding. Like I was thinking it would be a cool way. I just got some hillstream loaches, so a cool way to feed them and to have them kind of naturalistically graze. But yeah, it was a fun little trick. So that's one that I haven't done yet, but I picked up at the auction this past weekend, so I'm going to give it a go. And then my go-tos for live foods would be vinegar eels because they're bulletproof.
Yes, they are.
If you forget about them, they just make more. I've never had any issues keeping them. I find my laziness makes me use them less than I should, just because harvesting and then refilling and moving the plug from one bottle to another bottle. Like I usually have about 10 bottles lined up and kind of just go one bottle at a time and only harvest from one. So I'm only getting like one feeding. So I should put more in so that I feed more, but then just, moving the plug across from bottle to bottle and then topping up with fresh water, and all the vinegar eels swim above. I use filter floss as a plug so the vinegar eels will swim up through the neck of the bottle into the clear water, and then you just siphon out the clear water full of vinegar eels. But that little extra added step has been what slows me down from using them more than I do. I use microworms, also seem to be pretty bulletproof in my fish room. I just do it on oats with a little bit of yeast from time to time, but fairly rarely. I find if you put too much, then it can spoil the culture. And the trick that I learned for harvesting that is I usually just keep them in like a little yogurt container, like a small circle container, just a half inch, 3/4 of an inch oat mixture with water. And for harvesting, the trick I learned was a thick rubber band. So you just set a thick rubber band on top of the microworms, and they'll climb up on top of the rubber band.
Really?
So you can take the rubber band out and dip it in a cup of water to rinse them all off the rubber band. Or you can just take that rubber band and dip it into the tank.
That's pretty cool.
Usually mine, because it's quick.
Very
But
interesting.
Microworms get fed a lot more just because it's that easy. And then the other live food I have is grindle worms. Grindle worms ebb and flow. But I find when they're not producing, if I ignore it long enough and then try again, they'll still be there and way better. So I don't know if I just over harvest from time to time. So like it's everything I know about live foods, what everybody says is if it smells like death, then it's done. But I've never had anything that smells like death. So I feel like sometimes I'm just over harvesting, but brindle worms are really great too. I just have a mesh on top, like a cross stitch fabric or like a mesh grid that I set on top of the cocoa core is what I default for those, because they actually feed on, like you can even use leaves and botanicals or other stuff, because what they actually feed on is the organics in the makeup. So you don't really actually need to feed them extra. So like as long as you keep the substrate moist but not wet, they should be happy without even any additional feeding. The reason, like I use dog food just because it brings them out of the substrate and onto whatever you want them to go on. So I just cut little clear pieces of plastic, like random containers. I just cut up like flat plastic and set it on top of the dog food. They come up onto the dog food and then spread out on the pieces of plastic. And I usually just cut little kind of triangles of plastic. So I have like a little grid of plastic, and then I just pick up that plastic. You can dip it into water if you're worried about mixing your tank waters. So like if you dip it into a container of water, then you can just use a siphon or pipette to squirt it into tanks. Or once again, you can just pick up that plastic and dip it in the tank's feed, which is usually my default.
I've got a wee challenge for you. A few months back, I may or may not have accidentally poured way too much yeast into my microworm culture, my main master one, I call it. It bubbled up, and I'm 99% sure I was making some sort of a sourdough concoction. I didn't cook it to try it, but I'm adamant that I was brewing something. I left it. I didn't do anything to it, just left it. And about 3 months later, it has been the absolute strongest microworm culture I've ever had.
Oh, really?
Like, it is just insane how strong this culture is. Like, I almost feel like microworms are pretty bulletproof to start with. This is like bulletproof on some sort of massive buzz. Maybe over yeast one for a little while and see if it bubbles up and see if it improves the strength of it, because I don't know, maybe I've made some sort of mutant microworms that are just not indestructible now or something. But yeah, might be worth having a wee try with.
Well, I've heard you can do vinegar eels the same way as you can do
Yes.
microworms, but I find vinegar eels the regular way, the reason I would like them. So I have a friend that has tried doing them like microworms, but they work both ways actually. So.
Yeah. I think the
I
vinegar
guess
eels
since I
not
feed
in vinegar.
microworms more, maybe I should switch to.
Yeah, I think
trying
the
them that
vinegar
way.
eel is not just a lot easier to harvest in larger quantities when they're not in the vinegar. But yeah, care of them is a little bit more intense for it.
And then, like I said earlier, I picked up a culture of Daphnia at the auction this past weekend. So I have to pick Kirkwood Aquatics' mind about the best way to keep them. But I kind of watched his video, and fresh tank water is what he's done. And then for feeding, he said Corella. So I just have to source some Corella for now. I just fed them with some like super tiny green fry food from Sarah.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called offhand, but just comes in the little container and it's like dark green and makes your water green. So I thought that's kind of maybe might work. So he said feed every 2 days once the water's no longer green. Feed again, but it sounded like he just feeds every 2 days, and he uses a mix of Corella or green water. But I haven't really cultured any green water, so that's not been an option. But I just kind of shook up some of that fry food and squirted it in and hope for the best. They're still alive now. So
Good.
And then I think he does a full 100% water change once a week. So if I can stick with that schedule, that's probably how I killed my Moina, is just by my lack of water changes.
What are some common misconceptions about botanical aquariums that you'd like to dispel?
Well, it's a lot of it's just the detritus, the mulm, and the biofilms that people are scared of that aren't actually harmful to your tank, so shouldn't be afraid of. So I think that's generally the biggest one to dispel, is like it's not dirty. It's a natural ecosystem where you're creating critters to deal with all the stuff that's in there. So it's all food for something.
Do you think it's possible to have a botanical aquarium without the black water?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, like if you can get rid of the black water in so many ways. Like I have my old school planted tank, the one that my wife gifted me for COVID Christmas in 2020, is still running with the Tropica aquarium soil, but that sucks out the botanical or the tannins really quick. So it's almost like adding carbon or purigen or whatever. And I think the plants also suck out a portion of the tannins as well. So if you have a heavily planted tank, your tannins aren't too heavy. Like you have to keep reintroducing. So like if you don't want it, you can definitely have it. But yeah, there's lots of botanicals. Like if you boil it longer, you will get rid of more tannins and stuff like that. So like there's lots of different ways, and there's lots of fish like that are in botanical filled environments that are still with clear water. So like Betamacrostoma is a clear water betta, but there's still, like if you look at the videos of them in the wild, I think Chris Inglesoo had a video of them in the wild. There's still lots of leaves and other stuff where they live. It's just the way the water flows, or the way the water is exchanged, just happens more regularly and whatnot. So like, but also like a lot of like there's a lot of leaves and botanicals that won't add much to the water, but maybe they'll add biofilms and other stuff as well. So
Yeah.
Cool. What's your take on black water tanks are dirty? I'm not allowed a black water tank in my house because they're dirty, according to my wife.
yeah, no, that's my wife's take as well. So she does like the planted ones a lot more, but I moved all of my tanks to the basement anyway, so she doesn't really have to interact with them. The two remaining ones that I still have upstairs here are planted, but I have a couple that are kind of half-half. They have, they're getting more and more plants. So, but I've heard of a lot, but you can have some crystal clear black water tanks. Like, it's not dirty, but I find also when you get a little bit of that mix in the column, I think Scott Fellman or Scott Fellman's partner, Johnny Ciotti or something, called it flavor in the water. So when you're taking photos and stuff, sometimes you'll want to stir it up a bit to get like a little more atmosphere. Like, it's a lot more atmospheric and more natural. So like it's to everyone's business, but like if you don't want it to be dirty, if you want to
Back, yes, no?
There we go.
there we go. I just bumped
Back.
my phone. But yeah, you can have a crystal clear tank that's still darkly tinted. You just, but like, it's personal preference, but I think you can do it both ways. But I kind of embrace the dirt and detritus and malm and all the stuff that builds up, and I keep adding more. Like, I don't really remove anything from my tank bottoms, really. Like, it's more just siphoning out if there's larger chunks or dead, like floating plants and stuff. Like, that's usually all I'll remove.
You've spoken multiple times today, about some of the people that have very clearly inspired you on your journey so far. What are some of your favorite resources for your inspiration, whether it be people, which you've already mentioned, or other social medias or books or whatever? Where is it that you're drawing all of your information from? Because you've only been in the hobby for, say, roughly 5 years, and you're already
like
very much wealth of
2020
knowledge.
is when I began. So a lot of it's been through Instagram and just finding other places, but it's, like, it's been through podcasts and finding like you guys. I had already been following Chris Engelzoo, but I didn't know too much or didn't visit his website. Like, I was following him on Instagram, but his website is a treasure trove of information and videos and photos. So definitely check out CE Fish Essentials. So inspiring. He covers a lot more of the Southeast Asian direction that I was excited to find, because I found that was really hard. Like, I was finding South American inspiration fairly easily after a while. Like, once I, started down that rabbit hole, it was much easier to come by. But getting underwater imagery of Southeast Asia and India and everything over there had been hard. But yeah, Chris is a really good one. Ty Streetman has been wonderful to work with. He's been pointing me in all sorts of different directions when I'm like when I started looking into Southeast Asia, and he pointed me in many different directions. So he's been a great help, and I think his Aquatic Habitats book will be a treasure trove of different places to look, because he's collaborating with people all over the world to get images and photos and videos. So I think once that comes out, there'll be a lot more rabbit holes to jump down just based on that book and all the people he's collaborating with. Congo Nature Photography is a really great one. Oh, I better plug in my phone.
Have you ever played around with different seasonal influences when setting up biotope style? Like, obviously seasons change the appearance of areas across the world. So have you ever kind of played around with that idea?
Sorry guys, my phone's just about to die. I'm just plugging it in here.
Sounds like something I'd do.
I thought it was plugged in, but it wasn't plugged in on the power box.
A little bit important there.
Yeah.
just for the people that are in the chat, are you interested in the botanical style aquariums? And if you do, where do you find your inspiration for them? I think over the last 4 or 5 years, the acceptance of it is a lot more, which is great, which means there's more resources for it. There's more people out in the wild taking underwater videos and, surrounding videos, stuff like that. So I think moving forward that botanical blackwater aquariums are something that I think we'll see a lot more of, which I'm all for, because I think generally speaking they're quite phenomenal.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, seasonal's been super inspiring. Like Ty Streetman had some really great videos on like the Mato Grosso in Brazil when it was flooded and non-flooded and the differences. And Tannen talks a lot about like the ever-changing water flow and even recreating that in your tank. So like recreating the dry season and then slowly filling your tank. So yeah, there's lots of stuff that you can do, but I haven't actually done any of that stuff as of yet. But even just to see the difference in, like the Amazon, how high the water rises in the wet season compared to how low it is in the dry season. So.
Okay. I think definitely something that somebody that's got like an aquarium gallery could play around with. They could have, it's identical aquarium setup, but different stages of the seasons. I thought
Yeah, it would be so fun to do killifish in that sort of a way where you let it have a dry season, and then when you wet it, then you have fish as well. So.
Yeah, I know, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, when we were talking about food, the other thing I feed is a mix of frozen foods. So like I use frozen Daphnia and frozen baby brine and frozen bloodworms. I just remembered we hadn't finished that.
Where was it? Where did we go? Hold on. I had a question. I've lost it. What tips do you have for promoting natural behaviors like foraging and grazing with your fish?
Well, I think it's the addition of live food, but also just the addition of like the leaf litter and everything. Like my Decrosas run around picking up the leaf litter and finding what's underneath and stuff like that. So like I don't know if I have any other tips or tricks, but I feed them in so many different ways. Like sometimes I'll feed with fry food even to bigger fish, just so that like they have a different experience or different way of looking for food and stuff like that. So you can shake up fry food in water and it'll disperse completely differently than if you just shake it on the top. So I try and mix everything up I do, but I find for messing up your tank, I find live food is so much nicer. I find in a botanical method aquarium, if you do feed too much dry food, that you can get some buildup on some of the botanicals and stuff like that. Like just where, like if the fish missed it or whatever, like it's more unsightly than anything, not really. hasn't affected anything in my tanks, but it's just been one of the things that I've noticed.
Yeah. Where to go?
I'm still here. I was just feeling like my phone isn't actually charging now. It's plugged in.
Dennis has asked, he said, great guest. I have a 30 by 30 by 30 100-gallon plexi tank with a sump. My plan is to do a Congo type blackwater planted tank with it. Do you have any sources or pics for that?
Congo Nature Photography. Congo Nature Photography on Instagram is the only one I know offhand, but I'm sure Ty could point you in many other directions. But that's who Ty did point me to. When I was looking, I was keeping clown killifish for a while, so that was one of the directions. I can't remember the other person he pointed me towards. Ty had some really good African Congo kind of inspirations.
I did a similar one 2.5 to 3 years ago. we can't. Well, I struggle to do anything properly biotyped down here because we struggle with everything. But I had a lot of various Anubias in there and stuff like that, and kind of tried to replicate it. I went down the rabbit hole for a very long time trying to find information about it, and I did struggle a bit, and I can't quite remember where I found some, but I did eventually find some fairly robust and interesting information about sort of setting that up. I think after a while, when you start searching for enough stuff, the old Google machine picks up what you're actually trying to find, and they will eventually send you in the right direction if you can't shoulder tap people.
Yeah, like another thing that I found really helpful is the Watercolors Aquarium Gallery podcast, like Charles Bradford, I can't remember his last name, but he is part of the podcast, and he's done some stuff with African species, and he might have some directions to point you in as well. They're really helpful and responsive over there as well.
Cool. Very good. Cool. So that's pretty much brought me to the end of what I've got to ask. Do you have anything else you'd like to ask, John?
I was just about to ask about your resources, but like who you reach out to for inspiration on social media. But I think that kind of last question from Dennis kind of covered that. So I'm happy. I'm happy with everything that we've covered.
Cool. Okay. Well, we like to close off our Fanatics Friday coffee dates with a quick school of six, which is 6 short answer questions that aren't meant to put you on the spot, but every now and then they do.
Mhm.
So my first question for you is, doing a coin toss, do you call heads or tails?
Oh, I hear tails never fails.
Tails never fails. Are you a tea or a coffee drinker?
Neither. I have never powered through the horrible taste to learn to appreciate either. No, I'm more Mountain Dew or Coke kind of person. I always like cooler beverages and with bubbles, so never been a
Okay.
fan. Never powered through, mostly like beer and wine. I never powered through the horrible taste and learned to like it.
Are we alone in the universe?
I don't think so, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have any thoughts on what it would be, but I don't think so.
If you could have a meal with somebody alive or dead from any point in time, fictional or real, who would that be?
Oh, I didn't even think about this one. I powered through all your podcasts in like a month after I discovered them. So they're still all fresh in my mind, but this is the one I hadn't given much thought to because I'm not that thoughtful. Yeah, no, I've enjoyed a lot of the responses, but I have none as clever as any of the other people. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's hanging out with fish people these days. Like I'm kind of one direction. So like, yeah, if there's Rosario Lacarte just passed, and I'm sure he would have had lots of information to pass on and stuff like that, and so many other people like Ivan McColgy would be fun to hang out with and pick his mind and hang out with him and stuff like that. So yeah, like I'm pretty narrow-minded. So like if I'm going down a rabbit hole, I'll go hardcore. So at the moment, it would be fishy-related peeps.
Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
Well, we call it rock, paper, scissors here. Like,
Well, you would be calling it wrong.
Your other guests, but good old rock. Nothing beats rock.
Nothing beats rock, except for paper. But that's okay.
That's what they tell me, but Homer thinks otherwise.
What's your unicorn fish? One that you'd like to keep, breed, spawn, take photos of, see in the wild? What's that one fish that you just want to be around?
There's pencil fish that I've never seen available ever, but I've heard tale of, called Ananostomus sp, the barred pencil fish. So many of my pencil fish will have a diagonal barred pattern when they're sleeping. Like so many of my fish, I really like all their different modes. So like most of my fish have like 3 different color schemes, like if they're stressed, if they're sleeping, or if they're breeding or feisty. So like with a pencil fish, they usually have some sort of different pattern, usually like a diagonal barring pattern, but the barred pencil fish has that as their default. So it's kind of like a diagonal, but it's also one of the fun ones that has a 45-degree angle for swimming. So they're pointed towards the top of the tank. So it's just a nice different vibe. Like the way they behave and interact with the tank is completely different than the horizontal swimming pencil fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was one that came up, but it's always whatever. I find I'm usually just looking for whatever fish spend time with the fish I'm keeping is usually the one I'm after. So like it's been trying to find, I have Betta Edithae and the Travonym. One of the people I follow for inspiration had a post recently with Betta Edithae in the wild, and he had, I think it's the island of Banca, Hexazona barbs, or I don't know, Desmopontius hexazona is native to the same waterways as Betta Edithae. So like that was the one that would have been my list. And I didn't quite find them, but I found snakeskin barbs, which are similar but different, similar. Yeah, so biotope inspired, but not perfect. But barbs are really hard to come by up here. Nobody keeps pencil fish or barbs, so another fish I like that nobody has.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh. And my last question for you is, where can people find you? And I would encourage people to find you on your Instagram account. So self-plug, go for gold. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me there, and if I ever do more, you can also just go to ryanschmidt.com/swampdrab. Currently, it just links to my Instagram, but if I've been considering podcasts or YouTube, or maybe even setting up a little Substack so I can have a little more in-depth stuff than you can post on Instagram. So I've been kind of considering all those options, but if you go to ryanschmidt.com/swampdrab, other than just going to Swampdrab on Instagram. But I think I'm on TikTok, and that might be the same. It might be Swampdrab. But
Same name on TikTok?
yeah, it would be the same name on TikTok and Threads, but I really just did a couple posts on both. So stick to Instagram. That's what I like. I'm a visual person, so I found it's the best suited for me, other than like YouTube when it comes to visual.
Cool. Well, that's all we have today. So thank you very much for joining us. I much appreciate it. And also, I would like to say thank you very much for listening to the podcast as well. It's really cool that you've taken to them and you enjoy them as well. It's really fantastic. So cool.
Thanks so much for having me. I want to know what's next for you, Cam. What happens now that the fish shop is closing? Or closed? Because it closed yesterday.
Yeah, closed yesterday. Your guess is as good as mine right now. I guess I'm technically unemployed, but I think I'm technically still self-employed, so I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I didn't know. I don't know too much about pre-cam with a fish store, so I wasn't sure what you were up to before. If you were breeding fish and selling them yourself before you opened a fish shop, or what spawned you opening a fish shop?
Peer pressure in a positive way. Yeah, no, I'm not entirely sure. We'll just see how he goes. I'm not, I know, the universe what it wants to do, so I'm not too worried at the moment. Next week will be a massive job of cleaning everything up. Got trailers coming in to move out what we need to move out, and then we'll just see what happens. At this stage, definitely we'll be continuing to remain online trading, particularly while we still have the building. And then once the building goes, we'll just cross that bridge and we'll go from there.
I would love to hear a podcast with you talking fish shops. Like I know Nick from Keeping Fish Simple just shut down his shop, or is shutting down his fish shop. But
that.
If you two were to talk with like Ben from Watercolors Aquarium Gallery, I think it would be a really cool perspective, because I know every fish keeper in the back of their mind has, one day I'll open a shop and stuff like that. So I think it would be really, really interesting to kind of hear the back end of opening a shop and how it goes and what it entails. And like even if it closed, there's so much experience to be had there. Like,
Mm.
and also running a shop will give you so many different tips to running a fish room as well. So I just thought there's so much information. I want that podcast to happen with other shop owners. I just think it would be so interesting.
Start shoulder tapping people, you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. It's much appreciated. I hope you have a fantastic Thursday night, Halloween for the people that are still Halloweening, and a great Friday for all you Friday people. Thanks very much. Have a good fish keeping. Catch you later.
See ya.
Have a good one.
Nice seeing you.